Good afternoon, everyone, to this session of our third day, where we have 3 speakers this afternoon. I'd just like to remind all of you that you can submit questions via the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. And then after each talk, our Q&A presenter, who for this afternoon is Ingrid Seeborger, will be posing the questions to the speakers. I see that we're just about on time. So I'd like to introduce our first speaker for this afternoon, and that is Adelaide Kusena. Welcome. You're free to unmute yourself and turn your video on if you choose to do so. Our first paper, which was co-authored by Adelaide Kusena and Erwin Brown, is all about skills requirements for business intelligence professionals. And it involves a content analysis of job advertisements in South Africa. And for this presentation, we'll actually be showing a recorded PowerPoint session. So Adelaide, would you like to say hello before we set the recording going?
Everyone, and thanks for coming.
Thank you, Adelaide. Okay, let's start our first presentation with the recorded session. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Adelaide Kusena, and I'm currently a master's student at the University of Cape Town. And I'm here to present our paper, which is entitled Skills Requirements for Business Intelligence Professionals, a content analysis of job advertisements in South Africa. So this is a breakdown of what I'm going to talk about in this paper. I'll start with the introduction. So just to give you a brief background about business intelligence. So business intelligence is a process of collecting, analyzing, and interpreting data for strategic decision making, as well as predicting future events of an organization. So with BI, it also enables the top management to extract useful information from the historical and current data to solve business problems. So on skills demand in South Africa, a report on skills planning and demand in South Africa indicates that not enough effort has been made to improve employee skills. And there's also a study that was done by Dijega and Brown in 2016, which also highlighted on requisite skills for BI professionals using interviews with BI professionals to develop and validate a skills typology. The typology was validated based on 10 interviews. However, the purpose of this study was to further validate and refine the typology using online job advertisements to provide further generalizability. So, moving on, we are now on the conceptual model that was used by Dijega and Brown. So they further articulated more precise categories as shown in this table. So data was collected using online job advertisements. Specifically, 5 job portals were focused on based on their popularity. So the 5 online job portals used to collect data are shown in this table, which are Career Junction, Career 24, Indeed, LinkedIn, and PNet. And 40% of the adverts were found from LinkedIn, followed by Indeed, which had 32.6%. And most recruiters posted jobs on these 5 main portals in South Africa. So this is how the data was filtered. Initially, I started with 200 data, and 16 were removed as duplicates, and 4 were removed as they did not match the content of the data. So coming to the analysis of the results, I'll start with the job location. So five of the 9 provinces in South Africa were identified as having BI jobs offered. The table showing all the 9 provinces, and the 4 where BI jobs were not presented, including Mpumalanga, Free State, Northern Cape, and Northwest. Gauteng had the greatest number of BI jobs, which amounted to 53%, followed by Western Cape, which had 39.5% of BI jobs advertised. 5% of jobs were not specified as to location. Now we move on to the job industry. Industry specified as offering BI jobs amounted to 8. The 2 most prominent industries that required BI professionals were IT services, which amounted for 36%, followed by financial services, which had 21%, as you can see on the table. So experience was one of the other criteria that were being looked for by employers. So this table illustrates the minimum number of years required for BI professionals in South Africa. The required years were split into a range of 5 groups. The most required experience ranged from 4 to 6 years, followed by 0 to 3 years. However, a few jobs that were advertised required experience that ranged from 7 to 10 plus years, with an exception of a few jobs that did not specify experience required. So now this is just a match of BI roles against the skills that were required. So 6 BI roles were identified in the job advertisements, these being business analyst, BI architect, BI consultant, BI developer, and BI specialist, and BI team lead. So BI developers and business analysts were the most commonly mentioned roles. So coming to the discussion of this paper was all about, we had the categorization that has been validated. So through the analysis of job advertisements, this categorization has been validated. In this study, it revealed that the predominant roles in the BI domain were business analysts and BI developers. And the soft skills has also been noted to be the most important skills in all roles that have been identified. In addition, the finding also informs educators on which topics to focus on. So just to round up and wrap up this presentation, so best prospects for BI professionals were in Gauteng and Western Cape, and then the BI industries, the industries that offered BI jobs were found in IT and financial industries. And the job roles that were mostly identified in the adverts were for BI developers and business analysts. And then the qualifications that were also presented in the research where they required people with a degree in information systems, computer science, information technology, with a minimum experience of 4 to 6 years. And then the skills that were required were BI strategy, project management, business analysis, design and coding, reporting and analytics, knowledge management, and soft skills. Thank you. I don't know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Adelaide, for that informative talk. I don't see any questions at the moment, but while perhaps people are typing in some questions for you, perhaps I could just pose a question. Could you maybe just elaborate on where you found the job adverts? So was it taken from newspapers, online, etc.?
Okay, so for the job advertisement, they were taken online using the online portals that were LinkedIn, Careers24, Indeed, and Peanut. So those were the portals that I used.
Thank you very much. I'm going to pass it over to our question and answer coordinator, Ingrid. Are there any other questions, or are there some questions for Adelaide?
Hi, Thank you, Adelaide, for your presentation. Okay, so I've got a few questions, and we've got one question that's come in so far. What do you recommend from the results of your study should be the impact on curriculum within computer science and information systems departments going forward?
Okay, thank you. I think this will also enable the educational industry to try and find, try to put focus on specific areas which were mentioned, because some of the stuff related in the program and data analysts. So those are the other subject areas that the educational industries should also focus on, to put emphasis as to give like a hands approach, more practical. So because it was seen to be one of the other areas which is being required by industries.
Okay, thank you. And we've got two more questions that have come in. How did you classify all the BI related job titles? I see BI developer, BI analyst, etc. On Career Junction.
Okay, so I was also basing on the So I also just typed on the site that let me look for developers, analysts, and to see, because those were the other things that came up through my literature.
Okay, thank you. And the final question that we have, when did you collect the data from the sites? Over what period of time were the listings collected?
Okay, so based on this research, I was an honor student when I was doing this, which was a period of 1 year to finish this study. So I had to collect my data of around April, so I had to do it over every 2 weeks. I had to look for because it was just a 1 year research program for honors.
Okay. And last question, did you include business analytics related jobs in your study?
Well, in this study, not really. However, I currently
Sorry, everyone. I think we've actually lost Adelaide. Adelaide, are you still there?
Yes, I'm still there.
Sorry, could you maybe just repeat your answer to the last to your last question about the business analytics related jobs?
Okay, so I was saying on business analytics related jobs, I didn't really actually business analytics.
I am not able to hear the reply. I'm not sure if Adelaide's connection is poor, but I'm afraid I didn't catch any of that.
I didn't either. Sorry, Ingrid. I think we might have to just cut this one short, and perhaps Adelaide can look at the question and answers. Adelaide, if you could perhaps just look at the tab below on your screen where Q&A, and perhaps you'd like to just type in the answers for the two questions that we haven't, the one about the business analytics jobs, and there is an additional question as well. If you could perhaps maybe type the answers in, that would assist.
Okay, that would be fine.
Okay.
Thank you, Ingrid. And thank you, Adelaide, for the presentation and also for the answering of the questions. And I'm sure that you can spend if you could spend a few minutes just adding in some of the answers to the unanswered questions, and then that will suffice for answering the questions. Unfortunately, all the internet connections are not fantastic. But thank you very much for your talk as well. It was a very enlightening one and a topic that is very hot at the moment in terms of academia.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Adelaide. Thank you. So we are a little bit early before our next speaker will be presenting. And let me just see if I see. Yes, I see that Sunette Ibis is enrolled, but we'll just give a few minutes for Adelaide to type some answers, and then we can move forward with the next presentation, which will also be a video recording. Right, I see that our next speaker has actually been promoted to being a panelist now. So good afternoon to Sunette and welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the opportunity and thank you for the promotion. I feel quite privileged to be able to say something. And well done on organising a fantastic technical conference. I think kudos to you and your team.
Thank you, Sunette. Promotion is easy these days with Zoom. So
fantastic. Can I give you my bank account details and then you can just, show me the remuneration as well for that?
That might not be so easy, but we can try. All right, let me introduce Sunette Ibis and Claudia de Cavallo's paper. This is a systematic literature review of data governance frameworks for big data implementations. And as I said previously, this will be a video recording, and Sunette will then be available thereafter to answer the questions that are posed via the Q&A question tab. So Sunette, if you have anything more to say, otherwise we can go with the video.
No, nothing more from my side. I don't think the video is as entertaining as a movie. It's that unicorn, but enjoy.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Welcome to this presentation by Sunette Ibis for the paper entitled A Systematic Literature Review of Data Governance Frameworks for Big Data Implementations. The work was conducted by Claudia de Carvalho, a fourth-year student at the University of Pretoria. The outline of this presentation is as follows. It will start with a brief introduction and also cover the concept of big data, followed by a literature background, focusing on data governance and the importance of data governance. The research method will be covered, whereafter the analysis of findings will be presented as well as a conclusion. In a single day, 2.5 billion gigabytes of data is produced, and by the end of 2020, it is expected that over 40 trillion gigabytes of data will be created, replicated, and consumed. The growth in data volumes can be attributed to several factors, including recent technology trends, such as the Internet of Things, the rapidly increasing use of cloud computing, as well as the spread of Internet-enabled devices. Due to the ever-evolving nature of technology, the generation of data by organizations has increased significantly. As we all know, big data is not just referring to the size of data, but also includes other characteristics discussed on the next slide. Big data has some unique characteristics attached to it. For example, it refers to the volume of data, the velocity of data, the different variety of the sources of the data, being either structured or unstructured, the value included in the data, if you can use it, as well as the veracity of data. This image created by EMC provides an excellent summary of the current big data journey we need to embark on in order to get to the full value of big data. Where we are in terms of the business intelligence and data warehouse landscape, considering the unique characteristics of data, we need to embark and face deep waters to be able to get to the value journey. In other words, untap the value in big data implementations. During this journey, there are certain governance factors that we need to take into account to be able to untap the true value of the data. This brings us to the research question for the paper, namely, what data governance frameworks exist for big data adoptions? Before we present the findings of the paper, it's important to consider a definition for data governance. Although no single universal definition of data governance exists, both researchers and practitioners agree that data governance refers to assigning rights and responsibilities regarding the management of data assets to make sure that accountability and the adoption of data governance is enforced. But why do we need data governance frameworks? First of all, in order to adequately prepare for the transition to big data, organizations must establish a data governance framework to ensure that the data captured and stored is accurate, useful, adhere to privacy laws and regulations, as well as reducing risks, to name a few reasons. The research method of the study was a systematic literature review based on the guidelines proposed by Kitchenham. A systematic literature review is a secondary study that composes of extracting data from existing work or primary studies and synthesis the findings. Firstly, search terms were identified. These included big data governance, a big data governance framework, big data, data governance, and data governance framework. All these search strings were combined by either using Boolean or and the AND operator. In conjunction with the selection of search terms, inclusion and exclusion criteria were identified and applied to all search results obtained. The inclusion criteria were as follows: papers that were published between 2006 and 2019, journal papers, conference proceedings, reports and book chapters. Peer-reviewed papers and papers written in English were considered. The exclusion criteria included papers returned that were irrelevant to the research question, short papers such as introductions, posters, and mini tracks. The source selection process selected of three main steps. The first step was a literature search conducted to source all relevant papers of the study. 4 academic online databases were searched, namely Science Direct, WorldCat.org, DOHJ, and JSTOR. The primary search term was Big Data Governance. Additional but related terms such as data governance, Big Data Governance Framework, and Big Data. All search results returned were imported into a data extraction table, which is attached to the study. For step 2, an initial screening was done, whereby each paper title was checked to determine whether it is relevant to the research topic, and the inclusion and exclusion criteria was applied. All records that did not contain keywords or concepts relevant to the research topic or did not meet the inclusion criteria were immediately excluded. Step 3 consisted of a full text analysis. There were several cases where the full texts were not available. Alternative searches were done and the author of the paper was contacted for a copy of the paper where appropriate. The final literature pool evaluated identified 5 main conceptual data governance frameworks. These were labeled as BDG F1 to 5. BDG F1, proposed by Kim and Cho, placed importance on big data services to create value that aligns with the overall organizational objective of achieving value. Big data provides an organization with the opportunity to create a new analysis that will in turn produce more value for the organizations. Organizations should therefore clarify the values of big data services that will be revealed through the formalization of their purpose and declarations. BDGF2, presented by Krishnan, adopts and modifies 7 key data governance concepts to governance the implementation of any big data initiative. The selected information concepts adopted were stewardships, information governance, data definition and usage standards, master data management, metadata management, data lifecycle management, and risk and containment. BDGF3, presented by Chamberlain, uses an established data governance framework as a basis and extends on each of the 5 domains that can be used to governance any big data initiative. The 5 domains that were identified include data principles, data quality, metadata management, data access, and data lifecycle. BDGF4, presented by Suarez, provides a framework for big data governance that consisted of 3 dimensions, namely big data types, information disciplines, industries, and functions. BDGF5, as presented by Al-Badi et al., conducted a review of 12 existing data governance frameworks. For each of the frameworks, Al-Badi et al. Identified the components and discussed their limitations. Each of the 5 identified frameworks were compared and presented in the table on screen. The components of each of the framework are listed in each row of the table. These components are also referred to as characteristics. Data for instances where components have the same meaning but were named differently, a generalized label were used for each of the components, and these were the components on the left-hand side. The comparison aims to highlight the similarities between each framework and identify the key components that should be incorporated into the conceptual big data governance framework. For example, data quality and master data management. Based on the comparison of the characteristics on the previous slide, the following can be highlighted. 4 out of 5 frameworks focus on enforcing data quality. Organizational understanding or context is of the utmost importance when considering the adoption of data governance framework for big data. These include the industry in which the organization functions, the size of the organization, as well as the organizational culture. As a result of the comparison, 6 main pillars or components of a conceptual big data framework can be identified. First of all, people, processes, and technology in the organization forms the foundation of the conceptual big data governance framework. After considering these 3 items, the following 6 items should be considered when adopting a governance framework. First of all, the importance of data quality, data ownership in the organization, the security and privacy of data and the policies around that, metadata management, master data management, as well as data lifecycle management. In conclusion, the adoption of a data governance framework has become very important as more organizations rely on big data to make informed decisions. Data is a critical organizational asset that needs to be managed and safeguarded using data governance frameworks. Big data has unique characteristics which require a unique data governance approach. The proposed six-pillar conceptual framework provides governance guidance when adopting big data in organizations. Finally, we can only use data as a valuable asset and as the new crude oil in our organization if we educate the users of data in how to use and how to deal with data. Thank you for your time. Any questions are now welcome.
Thank you, Sunette. And I do apologize to the one attendee who's just joined us. I started this second talk a little bit early. I didn't realize quite how early I started it. We seem to be running very quickly through this afternoon. But I think I'll go to our Q&A coordinator, Ingrid, and see what questions we have for Sunette in the meantime. Thanks, Ingrid.
Hi, and thank you, Sunette, for a really interesting presentation. So first question in, what role did data security relating to cloud computing play in the frameworks?
Thank you for the question. Very valid and a very hot topic at the moment, data security and cloud computing. Strangely enough, our analysis of the current publications only revealed that data security and privacy were important in two frameworks. So it's difficult to answer in terms of the cloud computing because we didn't make that distinction between cloud computing data governance frameworks and just normal data governance frameworks, if it makes sense. And even given that the data security issue and privacy issue were not as important as one would expect in the current literature. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, thank you. We haven't had any more questions from the floor, but perhaps I can pose one from myself. What possibilities do you have for extending your research and being able to actually implement the framework with an organization, you know, to get some data on the effectiveness of the framework as a framework for big data governance?
Yes, it's actually a very good question. As I said, this work was conducted by a fourth-year level student, honors level student, and we're waiting for her to enroll for her master's because we would like to take it out in the industry to practitioners and actually implement to see what the shortcomings are. So that's the plan going forward. I also have a PhD student currently working on the topic of data governance in banks, and there's maybe a slight possibility that we can go and test it in a banking environment as well.
Okay, brilliant.
Thank you,
yeah,
Ingrid.
Karen, I don't know if you have any questions from your side as well.
Thank you. Yes, I actually do, Sunette. When you've got all this wonderful information and the new framework, let me rephrase that. Have you also looked at the various, from the teaching side, what the various curriculums are using and doing in terms of, you know, teaching big data frameworks? And is this likely to be included or added into the study at any stage?
That is a good research question for future research. Thank you for that. I've made a note. We actually didn't even think about that. We do cover, I look after the database stream at UP on second year level. And we do touch on data governance, but very briefly, not to the extent of looking at models and frameworks and how they're actually implemented. But that's a fantastic idea because it's such a hot topic and it's so much needed out there that watch out for the next Sacla paper next year focusing on this topic. Thank you.
That sounds fantastic, and that we definitely will watch out for the second installment on this topic. So once again, thank you from myself too for a very informative talk. And now we are still very far in advance, so perhaps everyone would like a cup of coffee. Can't offer it all, but I think we could break and then we'll finish our last paper at 3 o'clock with the last for today. Thank you very much. So short break until 3, and then I'll be back with you. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kerry Lynn Thompson, and my co-presenter
Good day, everyone. My name is Ola
Thank you to all of our attendees who have stuck with us through this unscheduled break. The reason for the break was two fairly short presentations at the beginning of the session. So we took an unscheduled coffee break, and I hope you all enjoyed your beverage. I certainly did. And we're now coming to the end of our session, but we do have one important paper still to listen to, and I will introduce that in about a minute. So please just hang in there. We'll be back with you in a minute. Okay, I think we're now ready to go. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome Professor Mac van der Merwe, who's going to be presenting the final paper for today. And that's a paper co-authored by himself and Ambrose Azetta. And it's titled Exploring the Impact of ICT Use Patterns on Postgraduate Student Academic Achievement in a Developing Country. So Prof. van der Merwe, over to you. You're very welcome to. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you so much. Let me just. All right, is the screen showing?
It is showing, but it's showing, if you just go into the slideshow itself, it's still showing in, but it is showing.
So I can start. Okay, thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you for joining me in my presentation of my paper, Exploring the Impact of ICT Use Patterns on Postgraduate Student Academic Achievement in a Developing Country. I'm Mac van der Merwe, and the co-author is Ambrose Azetta. As computing lecturers, I think we all share the view that the use of ICT can not only improve our own teaching, but it will also improve student learning and ultimately student performance. However, research data is equivocal. One reason for this, as pointed out by BHE, is that the real impact of ICT on learning is not easily understood, and for various reasons. For example, are we referring to ICT infrastructures or to the actual use? Is intensity of use an important factor? Are we referring to specific student skills and competences or domains, or to more holistic concepts of learning? And how do we define and capture the relationship between ICT use and learning? Now, the World Bank is very interested in this relationship between ICT use and learner performance. Turkano, who works for the World Bank, created a series of knowledge maps regarding what is and what is not known about key areas of ICT use in education, and particularly in OECD and developed countries. From these maps, in 2005, we formulated several pressing research questions, and questions and statements are still relevant, thereby just confirming that we still do not have answers to many of the basic questions asked in 2005, and particularly as they relate to developing countries. Now, the question statements which this study focused on are some subjects better suited to ICT integration than others. Many studies find that positive effects of ICT on student learning often rely, and to an unacceptable degree, on self-reporting, which may be open to a variety of positive biases. And then the impact and nature of ICT use on student engagement has not been well documented. So the first objective of our study was to review and use the available literature on ICT use in education to identify a suitable research setting in a developing country and the relevant concepts and research questions and hypotheses to assist us in the construction of an appropriate research instrument. The second objective was to employ the instrument and to use instructor-assessed class marks in place of student self-reporting as a dependent variable in further statistical procedures. And in reporting the results, the overall purpose of this paper is to contribute to the gaps that Trakana has identified. Okay, so this slide presents a concise summary of our literature review. Around 48 papers that investigated the impact of ICT use on student performance or facets thereof. Now, if we look at this table, row-wise first, we see that 19 studies reported an impact on student performance, while 9 did not. In terms of country types, 37 studies done in developed countries and only 11 in developing countries. And the subject areas, as you can see there, range from languages to mathematics, as well as various subject areas. And when we move to the columns, we'll see that most studies were conducted at primary, secondary, and undergraduate level, and specifically at secondary level. What is interesting from our review is that only one study was conducted at postgraduate level. So the fact that only one study was conducted at postgraduate level caught our attention for various reasons. Since we are interested in the impact of ICT use on student performance, it would make sense to try and use students who are ICT users. Consider some of the general characteristics of postgrad students. Being older, they are still part of a millennial generation, but we expect them to have had more exposure to ICT, thereby removing potential ICT experience bias. Secondly, postgraduate students are research-oriented by nature, and this necessitates the use of ICT outside the classroom, such as searching for and exploring online resources. And thirdly, by demonstrating a capacity and dedication for further independent learning, the use of a wide range of learning strategies, including the use of ICT, is likely. So in terms of data collection, targeting postgrad students made sense. Furthermore, because we are interested in the use of ICT inside the classroom, the research-oriented course within a residential university was another target. Before we finalized the research setting, and this was an important part of the study, we revisited the literature in order to identify constructs to help us develop appropriate research hypotheses, which of course double as research questions. Now, in our view, the successful use of ICT in education is dependent on at least the following main constructs. Firstly, the extent to which an instructor would use ICT inside the classroom and in student course activities, the level of student engagement with such ICT inside and outside the classroom, students' ICT knowledge and skills, and any ICT challenges they may have and or encounter. And once again, we limited our review to studies where student performance was a focus. So constructs we identified from the literature as a fit within the 4 main constructs mentioned in the previous slide are in main construct 1, course activities using ICT, teaching with the aid of ICT, presentation, discussion of classwork with ICT, suitability of classwork for ICT integration, which resulted in hypothesis. One course activities using ICT have a positive impact on academic achievement. For main construct 2, engagement with ICT, subconstructs were identified were individual attitude, attentiveness, preferences and interest, and student diligence, which resulted in hypothesis 2, student engagement with ICT has a positive impact on academic achievement. The main construct 3, student use of ICT, subconstructs were identified were ICT competence and skills, exposure to ICT, enhancement of personal skills such as critical thinking, motivation, self-confidence, and creativity when using ICT. And the hypothesis is student ICT literacy has a positive impact on academic achievement. The main construct 4, challenges associated with ICT. Subconstructs we identified were anxiety over the use of ICT, privacy, safety and security issues, and barriers to the use of ICT. The hypothesis being challenges of ICT use have a negative impact on academic achievement. The slide offers a summary of how our survey was constructed. Most questions were sourced from previous studies in the field. We modified, adapted some to suit our focus, and added a few based on our theoretical understanding of the field. So construct A was demographics. B, if we look at B1, 7 items, B2, 5 items, B3, 7 items, of which 2 were adapted, and likewise for the rest of the survey. So let's have a look at the setting. It was a largely taught postgraduate 3-semester, 18 months program. Module research methodology is one of the courses offered for all master students from 9 departments at private university in Nigeria. Several instructors present different aspects of the course to all RM students as a group. So whereas each instructor presents an aspect of the course using his or her choice of ICT, all students are exposed to the same set of ICTs. In preparation for a final individual research mini dissertation in the 3rd semester, the 1st and the 2nd semester still focus on coursework. The end of the 2nd semester, we incorporated formal class time was used to collect data. Class mark consists of 4 instructor assessed components: class test mark, assignment mark, a research project mark, and a presentation mark. In-person survey was followed, where the students were provided with the questionnaires, handed it into the instructor who captured the marks for each student on the return survey, which was then anonymized. 320 surveys were distributed in class, with 302 returned, a response rate of 94%. And after some exploratory factor analysis to validate the main constructs, the subconstructs of B, D, and E were merged into the main construct, while in construct C, the 4 subconstructs were reduced to 3. Cronbach's alpha for internal consistency, all above 0.93. Let's move on to the results. I'm going to share all the demographics with you. That's in the paper. What is noteworthy is that when we considered, or should I say, played around with gender data, just because gender is known to be a factor in ICT use, we found is reflected in this table on the question, to what extent do you use ICT outside the classroom for purposes of classwork? A significant gender difference in the mean class mark in favor of males when ICT is used outside the classroom for purposes of classwork, and that the mean class mark improved significantly the more ICT was used outside the classroom. Similarly, we found a marginal increase in the mean class mark across age groups in favor of the older students, and higher combined mean class marks, 63.3 as opposed to 55.6 and 59.2, when instructors made use of ICT most of the time in teaching the course. Let's get down to the nitty-gritty. The two tables on this slide present the correlations reported between the various constructs and class marks. The bottom table summarizes the top table, and here we can see that constructs B and D return strong correlations. C, C1, C2, and C3 medium, while E a negative and very weak correlation. Let's have a look at prediction. A regression model with a multiple regression equation is offered at the top. Construct E, challenges of ICT use did not satisfy linearity criteria and was split into two in model 1, which was removed in model 2. However, with little impact on R squared, hence model 1 was retained. This non-linearity problem discovered is considered an area that requires further research, so I'm going to stop there. The point is that the combined constructs have a significant positive impact on class marks. As you can see there at the top, y equals construct B plus construct C plus construct D plus construct E1 construct E2. Let's move on to our hypothesis testing. As can be seen in the table, and continuing with the two models mentioned in the previous slide, in our hypothesis 4 being split into two, H4 and H4B, based on a strong positive correlation with a prediction of student academic achievement, H1 to H3 were therefore accepted, while H4 challenges of ICT use were rejected. So what have we learned? We are confident that we've demonstrated the following. Postgrad research-driven settings ideally suited to ICT integration because only one study was done. Postgraduate level, it adds new knowledge to the literature. Although not a focus, gender impacts reported in this study are consistent with literature. And the constructs employed in the study have succeeded in describing the impact and nature of ICT use, student engagement with ICT, as well as general engagement with studies, but to a lesser effect, and the impact of this on student performance. By employing instructor-assessed class marks as a dependent variable, we were able to confirm positive results from previous studies that were conducted at different levels of education, different subject areas, and different country levels, but where student self-reporting on learning achievement was utilized. And finally, given that the students are subject to doing a research methodology course, the results have confirmed the roles and potential benefits of integrating ICT in further postgraduate studies. And this is where we end. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that very insightful presentation and some very interesting conclusions that you've reached. I'm going to pass over to Ingrid to see if there's some questions from the floor for you. And I'd just also like to remind the attendees that please, you can still pose questions using the Q&A tab at the bottom, and then Ingrid will then pose them to our speaker. So over to you, Ingrid.
Thanks, Karen. And thanks, Mac, for a very interesting presentation. So the first question, why do you think that ICTs are having such a positive impact on academic performance? Do you think that there is then an inherent property that, you know, is seeing higher cognitive engagement from students?
That's not an easy question to answer. This is why we're doing this research. This particular area of ICT use patterns and the impact it has, not just on student achievement, but on students in general, is something that I've pursued over the last 2.5 years. Two articles that I've, well, one published and one recently accepted, for example, looks at the impact ICT use patterns have on students in a distance education environment, and more specifically on their mental health, their social, emotional, and psychological well-being. And as Beaji has said, you know, there are so many variables involved that it's difficult to come to a final conclusion why this is, but that's what we can do, is just do research. If I can just quickly just refer to my other studies, you know, in a distance education university at UNISA, other research that we've done have shown that a large percentage of our, especially historically disadvantaged students, don't have access to ICT to the extent that the historically advantaged students have. And one would assume that puts a lot of pressure on them, as we've seen now with this COVID and UNISA. I mean, it's just one crisis followed by another one, and it's stressful for the lecturers, it's stressful for the students. So to come back to your answer, I don't have a straightforward answer for you yet.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Okay, so we've got some more questions that have come in from the floor. The first is, what kind of challenges did the students face using ICTs?
Presentation, I pointed out that we used a private university, conducted the study in a private university. And a private university in Nigeria is really like a private school here. So access to ICT is not such a big problem as it would be in your public universities. But we wanted to control it. We wanted to see what's the impact of ICT use on student performance. But of course, we did include challenges just sort of as a backup, as a hypothesis. But no, I mean, much better than the average residential university.
Okay. And then a second question from the floor is, do you think that in the light of lockdown, students who have gotten used to the benefits of ICT are even worse affected by the withdrawal of this resource?
Well, you know, in the UNISA context, I mean, you know, it's actually strange. One would think that UNISA probably has got the best ICT infrastructure. Nothing has really changed in the UNISA context. It's a distance education environment. It's just we should be going on as we've always been, but that has not been the case. The last 3 months has been very stressful for students. But I think the difference is when we, for example, now UNISA has moved to online examinations. So students are required to make use more of ICT than normally. We'll, maybe just download assignments, upload it, take part in discussion forums, do online learning units, but at their own pace. So, I'm still not too sure. It's not working at UNISA. I'm in e-learning, and sometimes I say to myself, you should be sold on e-learning. I'm not too sure that we are ready yet for the move to fully open distance and electronic learning environments, because as it stands, that gap is still there between different student groups. All we can do at this point in time is research, try and find the answers there.
Okay, thank you. Another question that's come in. What has the impact been of UNISA moving from distance learning institution to an online learning institution as a result of COVID-19? I think you started to touch on that already in the last answer.
Pressure. Lots of pressure. As I say, if we look at the research that we've conducted, or I myself, specifically in the UNISA environment, and once it comes to that, UNISA is still not fully online. We need to move online. As I said in my previous answer, at this stage, I think UNISA is still to a large extent can still be called a blended learning environment. We're not close to ODL, and there are too many challenges. But as I said, what I've seen with this COVID, and not just on the students, I mean on the lecturers, this last 3 months has been, if I use the word horrible, I don't mean that I hated it, but I've probably never worked so hard in my life. And to be honest, been as stressed. Because when things go wrong with ICT, and not just on the student side, I mean, on the student side, one also has to understand many of our students are working students, and like other people who work, many of them didn't get an income. So all of a sudden you sit, I mean, in my 2 honors modules, I've got 550 postgraduate students. They don't get an income. They can't afford data to upload assignments. So all of a sudden, from 6 o'clock in the morning to 8 o'clock in the evening, you're busy dealing with student problems, which was not there before COVID. You had the odd student, but this COVID just brought so many different variables, and we're still trying to figure it out. But at least we've gone through the first cycle, and it can only go better from here. We had backup portals where students couldn't upload to the formal portal after they've done, say, MCQs from home or time-based examinations. Because now all of a sudden you've got a lot of students. I mean, some modules have got 2,000 students, and they all try to upload at the same time. So the system, there could be problems, which has happened. And then we had to create extra portals, which School of Computing had to stand in for. And I've also created my own backup portals, just in case the other 2 don't work. But it's happened 2 or 3 times that exams, exam sessions had to be cancelled. It's just absolutely too big. But I mean, that's in the context of UNISA, which has got 380,000 students. So for the smaller universities, I think in terms of ICT infrastructure, it might be easier. You can have more ICT, but more ICT also means more effort to keep it up. So yeah, for UNISA, it's been a tough 3 months. Sorry for the long answer.
No. So I have to admit, I mean, we are not obviously at Rhodes a distance education site. You know, we are Contact University, and having to move to doing distance education in a very rapid space of time. I think myself and my colleagues, we've sweated bullets. And from what you're saying, I mean, from the findings that you've got, where you're showing the significant impact that technology can have in a positive way on learning. Those students within our institutions then who have not had access to technology in this period, where we've been making backup plans in order to, post or courier to them paper-based materials, they're obviously then going to be at a greater, and even further disadvantage than to their peers who have had access to technology the entire time. So it's kind of like a double whammy based on what your results have found.
No, exactly. But, if I can just go back to because as I say, you need to look at everything and not just one study here and one study there. If student well-being is very important, then we need to do research and see what the impact is of ICT use patterns or the lack of access to ICT on students' well-being. I mean, the student that stresses, that does not have this access is at a disadvantage to students that do. And this is what surprised me, is that both those studies, and I actually did the first study just with the historically disadvantaged students, and the ICT use patterns of a lot of variables, we classified it as medium use. I mean, it's what ICT use at work combined with for studies, full-time students, part-time students, all of that. And we found no significant relationship between ICT use patterns, the students' mental health. In fact, most students were classified as moderately to mentally, what's the other word, good mental health. And then I did a repeat study, and I said, well, I don't understand it. Maybe the medium ICT use pattern may have masked some of these relationships. So let me go to the historically advantaged students who we know have better access, and demographic data showed that. And we found the same thing, no relationship between ICT use patterns and their mental health. Well, of course, there are many other factors that contribute to social well-being and mental health and those type of things. But one needs to consider these things, because at some point we need to make a decision. Are we going to go fully online? Is it fair? It's that debate. Should we go for the lowest common denominator? Do we just say to students, well, if you don't have ICT access, it's not our problem. You better get ICT. We can't wait for you. The world is moving on. But there are just so many questions. And as I say, what we've seen with UNISA, millions and millions of rand equipment. We've got unbelievable ICT infrastructure. And just like that, it crashes. So I say, we need to do more research. But that's the important point.
is we need to do research, we need to do, and this is why I'm doing research at UNISA. E-learning is one of my modules, and my students say to me, well, why don't we do full online in this very module? Okay, but honors is research, so it will never be like undergraduate full online. And then I point them. I have to go and look for research. I give them my own research and say, this is why. What do you think? But we need to get the answers, because the world's not going to wait for us. We have to move on, and we have to find solutions.
Okay, thank you. All right, we've got one final question that's just come in, which we'll take because this is the last session, and after this we'll all go home or out of your study. So the final question, what is your view on the link between the conference theme, TLDR, which is too long, didn't read, and the use of ICT patterns?
Just remind me of the conference theme again.
The conference theme is TLDR, too long, didn't read. So it's the mentality of, you know, with access to the internet and everything being done in 160 characters or whatever, that anything that's relatively long, students aren't actually interested in reading. So the question is, do you think there's a link between this theme of students not really wanting to read anything long and their use of ICT patterns, their ICT use patterns?
I can show you the data, which I have published. I asked students a lot of questions in terms of how do they use their ICT? For example, the whole range from uploading a tutorial letter, doing online course units, being online all the time. And if I talk of ICT, it includes phoning lecturers, taking part in discussion forums, using the internet to source extra information to help them in their assignments and those type of things. And what I found is that anything that points at collaboration, which requires more time online, students don't do. They go for the quick options. I want to download my assignment, I want to complete it offline, and I want to upload it. I want to go and check my marks and maybe send an email to my lecturer, but they don't even do that. And this is not what I'm saying. This is what students tell us. And I think this is one of the things that we struggle with is that how do you engage students? And this is why this was one of the research questions addressed in this paper, is to what extent does student engagement have an impact on their marks? So obviously, if the more engagement you have, the better your marks will be. But across the student profile, that's not what I found when I did the research on those specific. I sometimes get the idea, but this is a challenge for us as lecturers, is how to engage those students, how to pull them in, because to me it seems many of our students, but we're different. Remember, most of our students, 80% of our students are working students. They go to work, they come home in the evening and they're tired. Now, if I remember from the top of my head, sort of like average 1 to 2 hours per evening, and over weekends, they would spend on their studies. But you know, studying part-time is not that easy for working students, and one can understand that they are not really interested in being engaged all the time. They just want to study, pass a module, and move on. But as I said, that's where our challenge lie, because obviously we need to keep a certain level of what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, I'm tired. I'm like these working students now. I can't think straight anymore. We got to keep a standard. We can't lower our standards, and we need to figure out how we're going to pull those students in, but also not without being unfair to them, because it's tough for them.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm going to hand back over to Karen. I think that's all the questions we've got for your paper, but thank you so
Well, I
much.
hope I've answered the questions that were asked. I'm not sure. Maybe I went off on a tangent, maybe. I don't know.
Thank you, Mac, and thank you for your very honest answers and, excuse me, open sort of opinions. And I think what you've said has also made a lot of us realize that we haven't been alone. We sort of kind of think, oh, well, maybe Eunice is so much better off than we are because this is kind of what they do all the time. And as Ingrid said, it's been really hard to move from a face-to-face environment into an online environment. But it sounds like you lot and the UNISA group has also had equally as many challenges as we have. So thank you for that. It's really made us feel like we're all in this together, and we'll all get out of this together at some stage. So once again, thank you for your presentation and for your answers. Thank you.
Thank you. Well done. Let me just say once again, I think I've said it in the email, well done to you and your team. Certainly the way that you've presented and managed this, you've definitely got the capacity to do it. So no excuses, eh?
Yeah. Well, thank you for that too. And
Okay.
yes, and with that, we've come to the end of our afternoon. And as much as I would have loved to have said to you all tonight, see you later at our conference banquet dinner. Sorry, that's not going to happen, but I hope you have a good evening anyway, and hope to see you all tomorrow for our last day of our Sacla 2020. So thank you all. Goodbye.